There's a moment, roughly 11 seconds after you boot into this operating system for the first time, where your brain does something strange. It stops. Not because anything is wrong, because nothing is. You're staring at a desktop that looks like the one you have used for 15 years, and for a half second your mind refuses to accept that the thing sitting underneath it is not Windows at all. And by the time that half second passes, you have already noticed the second thing, the thing that actually changes how you feel about your own computer, which is silence, real silence. No ad tile pulsing in a start menu, no chatbot icon shoved into a taskbar you never asked to share, no banner warning you that your 5-year-old laptop has been quietly sentenced to obsolescence by a company worth more than most countries. Just a machine doing what you tell it and nothing else. I need you to sit with that, feeling for a second, because everything I am about to tell you only makes sense once you understand what it is like to feel a computer disappear underneath your hands instead of constantly interrupting them. My name doesn't matter here. What matters is that I have spent years installing Linux on machines that fought me the entire way, Ubuntu updates that broke halfway through, Fedora configurations that ate an evening, Arch installs that felt like defusing a bomb for a weekend, and then rewarded me with 4 beautiful hours before something quietly detonated. I kept waiting for the version of Linux you could actually hand to a person who has never heard the words package manager and never wants to. And in April of 2026, I finally found it. And I am not the only one, because right now, millions of people are discovering the exact same thing at the exact same time. And the story of why that is happening is bigger, stranger, and more urgent than any operating system review has a right to be. Let's rewind 6 months, because the context is the whole story. On October 14th, 2025, Microsoft pulled the plug on free security support for Windows 10. And in doing so, triggered the largest forced migration event personal computing has seen since Windows XP died in 2014, except this time there was a wall in the way, a wall called Windows 11, built on requirements so strict that an estimated 240 million functioning, perfectly capable computers could not climb over it. TPM 2.0 chips, secure boot mandates, processor allow lists that quietly excluded anything built before 2018, 240 million people were told, without being asked, that the machine sitting on their desk, the one that still turned on every morning and did exactly what they needed, was simply not good enough anymore. And then came the options. And I want you to really hear how insulting these options were, because outrage is the emotion that explains everything that happened next. Option 1, buy a new computer you don't need. Option 2, pay Microsoft $61 a year per device just to keep receiving security patches on hardware you already own, a fee that doubles to $122 the following year. Option 3, do nothing, and hope that criminals targeting unpatched machines, skip yours. That is the choice 250 million people were handed, and somewhere in the middle of that fury, a small, independent 17-year-old software project quietly released version 18.1, and everything changed. Here is where the story gets genuinely interesting, because this isn't just a fresh coat of paint on old software. This is a fundamental leap. Underneath the hood, 18.1 runs on Linux kernel 6.17, and I want to explain why that number actually matters to a normal human being who has never thought about a kernel in their life. Historically, the single most common reason people bounce off Linux within the first 10 minutes is hardware. You install it, and suddenly your Wi-Fi card is a mystery to the system, or your trackpad behaves like it's underwater, or your graphics card just refuses to cooperate. Kernel 6.17 closes an enormous number of those gaps in one release. Dedicated graphics from NVIDIA and AMD, the newest generation, of integrated Intel chips, hybrid GPU laptops that used to be a nightmare, expanded support for specific machines like Lenovo ThinkPads and Samsung Galaxy Books, even support for Apple's Magic Mouse, game controllers, and handheld gaming PCs. The unglamorous, invisible work of making hardware just work is, quietly, the most important thing this release accomplished. Because it is the difference between someone trying Linux once and giving up, or someone trying Linux once and never looking back. And then there's the part that made me stop and actually pay attention while using this thing every single day, the window tiling. If you're someone who works with 3 windows open at once, a browser, a document, a reference tab, you already know how much friction a bad window management adds to your day. 18.1 lets you bring every tiled window forward. From the taskbar in one motion, reorder your custom layouts on the fly and snap windows into intelligent zones instead of the crude halves and quarters most systems still offer. It doesn't just match what Windows 11's snap layouts do. In several ways, it beats it. But none of this, the kernel, the tiling, none of it would matter if the software people actually use every day didn't work. And this is where 18.1 made the single boldest move of the entire release. The system's built-in database for recognizing Windows installer files just grew by more than 40%, now covering over 240 applications. Here's what that actually means in practice. You drag a Windows.exe file onto your desktop, expecting it to fail, expecting the confusing wall of text Linux has thrown at people for 2 decades, and instead, the system recognizes exactly what you're trying to install and either hands you a native Linux equivalent or walks you, step by step, toward the right way to run it. This is the first release from any major distribution that treats migrating away from Windows as something you are guided through, not something you are abandoned to figure out alone. And once you feel that difference firsthand, you understand why the download numbers exploded the way they did. Out of the box, before you install a single additional thing, you already have everything the overwhelming majority of people need for daily life. A full Office suite for documents, spreadsheets, and presentations. A browser that isn't quietly harvesting your habits for an advertising empire. A media player that just plays your files without sending you on the codec scavenger hunt that used to be practically a rite of passage for new Linux users. A file manager that handles shared network drives without a fight, and a software store so clean and so simple that installing something like Chrome or VLC or Discord takes 3 clicks and 0 terminal commands. I have run the system as my only computer for weeks. I have not opened a terminal once. Not for anything routine, not for anything urgent, not once. And then there's the piece almost nobody talks about, the Web App Manager, which quietly solves a problem you didn't know had a name. Microsoft 365, Google Docs, Figma, Canva, Notion, these all install as first-class standalone applications, appearing in your app switcher, opening in their own dedicated window with no address bar, cluttering the experience. Indistinguishable from a native app, because functionally, for most people, they already were the app. Now let's talk about the part of this story that almost nobody covers, because everyone gets distracted by the desktop screenshots and the download counters, and the truth is, the real reason this became a movement instead of a niche hobby comes down to 3 things. Linux has historically failed to communicate to ordinary people. Privacy, hardware longevity, and who is actually behind the software you're trusting with your entire digital life. Start with privacy, because once you actually understand what has been happening quietly in the background of your Windows machine, it is genuinely difficult to feel the same way. About it, again, every time you open an app, every search you type into the system itself, diagnostic data, telemetry, all of it, collected continuously, and on Windows 11 Home there is no toggle, no setting, no hidden menu that lets you turn all of it off. You can reduce it. You cannot stop it. And then there's recall, the feature Microsoft announced that would silently screenshot your entire screen every few seconds and store it locally so an AI could search through your own life for you. A feature so alarming that public backlash forced Microsoft to make it opt-in instead of the default it was originally designed to be. And think about that for a second, because the fact that constant silent screenshotting of your private screen was ever the default tells you everything about how that relationship is actually structured. This new system collects 0 telemetry by default. 0. The team behind it does not know how many people are using it beyond public download counts. They do not know what you run, how long you use your machine, or where in the world you're sitting. Your computer, quietly, becomes yours again in a way that simply hasn't been true for years. And in 2026, as more people become genuinely conscious of where their data goes and who profits from it, this stops being a philosophical footnote and starts being the actual reason someone chooses one system over another. Then there's hardware longevity, and this is where the financial pressure and the emotional betrayal collide. Minimum requirements for this system: a dual-core processor, 2 gigabytes of memory, 15 gigabytes of storage. Recommended specs for a genuinely smooth experience: 4 gigabytes of memory and a 2 gigahertz dual-core chip. A laptop built in. 2013 clears that bar. A machine from 2015 or 2016, the exact machines Windows 11 rejected outright for lacking a security chip nobody had ever heard of, runs this system at full speed with guaranteed security updates until at least June of 2029. Every single one of those 240 million rejected computers, assuming the hardware itself is healthy, can run this operating system today for free and at scale across schools, small businesses, local governments, and households, where replacing a computer every 4 years is not a minor inconvenience but a genuine financial strain. That is not a small thing. That is a quiet, meaningful act of economic relief. And there is an environmental cost buried in this story that almost nobody talks about on camera. Every computer that avoids the landfill because an operating system didn't declare it obsolete is real electronic waste that never enters the waste stream, and e-waste, loaded with lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements that do not disappear cleanly, is one of the fastest growing waste categories on the entire planet. when a hardware requirement pushes hundreds of millions of devices toward premature replacement on a timeline built to serve a software upgrade cycle rather than actual hardware failure, that has a real cost, measured in tons, not just dollars. A 5-year-old laptop running this system until 2029 instead of ending up in a landfill in 2026 is a direct, measurable answer to that. Now, it's the part that changes how you see all of it, who actually built this. Two brothers started this project in 2008, when the older of the two was 16 years old, because they wanted a version of Linux their own family members could sit down at and use without fear, without a manual, without becoming a different kind of person just to check their email. 17 years later, the company remains independent. No parent corporation, no venture capital pulling strings behind a boardroom door, no shareholder earnings call dictating which features ship and which get quietly killed. The business model is almost embarrassingly simple. An optional paid tier and enterprise licensing. That's it. No advertising, no data brokered off to the highest bidder, no external company that can wake up tomorrow and decide your operating system now needs a mandatory AI assistant embedded in your file manager. Compare that to a publicly traded trillion-dollar company answering to shareholders every quarter, where every single product decision has to survive the filter of whether it serves those financial obligations first, and suddenly the ads in the start menu, the AI button nobody asked for, the hardware requirements that conveniently accelerate a replacement cycle benefiting hardware partners. None of it looks like an accident anymore. It looks like the straightforward, predictable output of the incentives in the room and the team behind. This alternative simply does not have those incentives, which means they answer to the people actually using their software in a way a trillion-dollar public company is structurally incapable of. And then there's the feature that quietly does what an entire marketing campaign for Windows 11 has been built around. An encrypted, fully local connection between your desktop and your Android phone, no cloud server, no external company routing your data anywhere. Your notifications appear on your desktop. You reply to texts from your keyboard. Your phone's battery shows up in your system tray. You drag and drop files between devices like they were always one machine. You can use your phone as a media remote. All of it happens entirely on your own local network, encrypted between two devices you own, and it ships for free in the base system with no account required and no phone number handed over to anyone. I want to be fair here, because pretending there are no trade-offs would be dishonest, and honesty is the only thing that makes any of this worth listening to. If your work depends on Adobe Premiere Pro or After Effects, there is no native version here, full stop. DaVinci Resolve does run natively, and it is genuinely one of the most powerful video editors that exists on any platform at any price, free for the tier that covers most real workflows. But switching your muscle memory from one tool to another is real friction, and project compatibility across formats is not always seamless. Photoshop does not run natively either, though the alternatives cover most illustration and photo work convincingly, and running Photoshop through compatibility layers has genuinely improved. If you live inside a Windows-only audio production suite, that is a case-by-case evaluation you need to make. Honestly, with yourself, the full version of Visual Studio, not the lightweight code editor which runs natively just fine, needs a virtual machine. These are real limits for real people, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But here's the question that actually matters. How many people does this genuinely affect? The data, over and over, points to the same answer. The overwhelming majority of how people actually use a personal computer is browsing, documents, email, video, social media, photos, and gaming through Steam, all of which this system handles without a single compromise. The professional editor who genuinely cannot function without Adobe's specific ecosystem is a real person, and also a small fraction of the 240 million people Windows 11 turned away. And the person checking email, writing a document, and playing games on a Friday night, the actual majority of the Windows user base loses nothing in this trade. Now, here's the part that removes the last psychological wall standing between curiosity and action, because I think this is the most undersold advantage in the entire Linux world, and almost nobody explains it clearly. You download the installer file from the official website. You write it to a USB drive using a free tool, a 5-minute process, requiring nothing beyond clicking the right file and the right drive. You restart your computer, boot from that USB, and within about 30 seconds, you're inside a fully working session of this entire operating system, without a single byte touching your hard drive. You browse the internet, you test your Wi-Fi, you check if your printer connects, you explore every application. And if you hate every second of it, you pull the USB out, and your computer boots straight back into Windows exactly as you left it, untouched, unharmed, unchanged. No version of Windows has ever offered you that kind of reversible curiosity. And that single fact removes the fear that keeps most people from ever trying something new with their own machine. If you like what you see, the installer walks you through setup in about 15 minutes, and one of the options is dual boot. running both systems side by side, a simple menu each time your computer starts asking which one you want today. People who take this path report the same story, almost word for word. A week goes by, then 2, then a month, and at some point they check when they last actually booted into Windows and realize it has quietly been a month. Nobody makes a dramatic announcement. The decision simply makes itself. And the community around this has genuinely surprised me. When something goes wrong on Windows, you search for help and find documentation written for IT departments, forum threads from 2017 that stopped being accurate years ago, or an official support answer that amounts to "we are aware of the issue." Ask a question here and you get real answers from real users, often from the actual developers themselves, on forums and communities that have grown explosively in the last 6 months as the Windows 10 migration pushed an entirely new wave of people through the door, patient with beginners in a way tech spaces rarely are. And what you eventually notice, after 2 or 3 weeks of living inside this system every day, is the thing I find hardest to put into words, but most important to say out loud. You stop thinking about the operating system at all. It disappears. It becomes the invisible layer between you and the things you actually care about, your documents, your browser, your inbox, your games, running on a foundation that does not interrupt you with advertising, does not push AI into your text editor uninvited, does not quietly photograph your own screen in the background, and will never wake up one day and inform you that the machine you rely on has been declared obsolete and it's time to pay up. It just works, quietly, consistently, without ever demanding to be noticed. And here is the number that tells you this isn't a niche story anymore. In June of 2026, Windows fell below 60% of global desktop web traffic for the first time in years, a single statistic representing millions of individual people who sat down, looked honestly at what they were being offered, and chose something else. If you're holding onto a computer Windows 11 rejected, or a machine that still runs perfectly fine but that you're simply tired of fighting, there has never been a lower risk moment to find out what's on the other side. Download it, put it on a USB drive, boot it up, and just look, because you genuinely have nothing to lose, and quite possibly the cleanest, calmest computing experience you've had in years waiting for you when you do.